human wants to do is they want to think about the key idea, but let the computer do the simple, easy task, right? And computers are very good at that. So if you could code, then you have more option and better way to allocate your time for spending more time on productive, like creative job, and let the computer do the simple task. Okay, but if you could not like code, you don't have any choice of that, right? You may could like ask other person to do it, but still it's good that you have like full control of doing that.
Yeah, for some reason the architecture looks better when the lights are on. Well, I guess we're ready to start.
Yeah, yeah.
3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode on The Long with FVR. Today we have Professor Ikuo. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, very pleasure to be here.
Oh yeah, it has been a very nice way to keep in touch, and also we got a lot of feedback from some of our friends of the Master in Central Banking that wanted to learn more about your journey and your story. So first and foremost, can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I am an associate professor at ASB. I teach finance. I have a Ph.D. From University of Wisconsin-Madison. I have been joined the ASB since 2021. I mostly teach courses at the Master in Central Banking program here at the ASB. But I also advise some of the action learning project, and that's our touching point with Fabian. And pretty much that's all.
Oh yeah, it's like such a fascinating point of view from a different perspective, because everybody who comes here that are not a central banker is like, okay, let me learn about business, and then we got your perspective. It's true, it was an action learning back in 2022 in that city of Bangkok in Thailand. For me, it was the very first time, and of course, for you will be a little different. So, how were your thoughts for that particular experience?
Yes, so going to Thailand was not my first time. Last time I went to Thailand was almost 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
City was definitely becoming more and more busier, as we see in the traffic, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so yeah, I was thinking like how much we could like say something about the action learning project, but fair to say, financial technology becoming more advanced, cryptocurrency, fintech, a lot of things are changing now. So yeah, it was very interesting to see how the finance is evolving in the front line,
Mm-hmm.
not in the textbook, at the workplace, in the financial market. What things are going, things are going on the front end. So that was very interesting. How about you? Like, what is your feeling?
For my feeling, I learned that one thing is the topic that we have in hand, and another topic is that what we have in real life. And the application is always the most important part, regardless of how much we want to display or we want to strategize. And implementation was paramount, I would say, even because there was a moment that we got one direction and then we realized, wait a second, the externalities of the situation tell us, hey, we need to be more aware. So that was the thing that I remember the most. The teammates were also fantastic, and also the city itself. It tells a different story because I haven't been in other places, and the first time that I see all these new characters, the new way of going around, even the gastronomy was a total different experience. So that was something that I really valued a lot. Of course, it was only, I would say, 2 weeks in the first time and 2 weeks in the second time. So yeah, very, very fascinating. And Bangkok as a city can be humid a lot. Like the weather itself was a little more humid than what Singapore or Kuala Lumpur are, because during the mornings I used to run, and I felt the difference. but also because the times was a little different. I'm not sure if you realized that when it was 7 o'clock in the morning, it was already sunny,
Mm-hmm.
and that was another part. So it was a very fantastic action learning, to be honest. Now, the central banking, people will say, wait a second, eh, how is a master's of central banking? So, can you tell us a little more about that topic?
Yeah, sure. So, Master in Central Banking is a full-time 1-year program. Students are coming from all over the world, but mostly coming from central banks in Southeast Asia and some central banks from Middle East. And the class size is around 10 to 20 per year. And the students have, on average, they have more than 5 years of experience in central banking. I think the average is about like 10 years of experience. So they are pretty senior, middle, mid-career central bankers who have their own expertise. So why they are going to learn again at the school at ASB about central banking. So Master in Central Banking program gives some sort of like new perspective to about the central banking. We teach, of course, monetary policy, financial stability, but we also teach the importance of ethics, governance, and also we put a lot of focusing on human networking. So, for example, we last year and this year we had ex-governor Shirakawa. So he was a governor of Bank of Japan during the global financial crisis, and also the great earthquake in Japan. We also have ex-governor Subarao from Central Bank of India. We have a bunch of like ex-governors actually visiting in KL, and students have a chance to discuss about the recent issues in central banking, and also they have a chance to have a one-on-one meeting with the governor to discuss about their master's thesis. So this Master in Central Banking program is a very special program, master program, which is full-time, in-person, and solely focusing on central banking. So it's a very unique program, and yeah, any central banker should join this program and learn.
Oh yeah, you heard this here. So you want, you can do it. Because it's not only the infrastructure, but also the network and the resources that make the program totally unique. Now, let's shift towards your journey, because I would like to hear from you when you were growing up. What made you say, I want to study this career path? I want to get a PhD in this area. So, how did you start?
So my career is not definitely under my control. I have a master's degree in physics and master's degree in economics and Ph.D. in finance. So I'm gonna tell you why I take that path. And I was like exposed by a lot of idiosyncratic random shock. So when I was a kid, I wanted to become a scientist, and I was very into physics. So I studied math, physics when I was a high school student, and I get into one of the best physics program in Japan, and I was very into theory of quantum physics. So I studied 4 years for undergrad and 2 years in grad program to learn about quantum information, particle physics, theory, all those kind of things. But at that time, it was around 2008, 2010. As you know, Lehman Brothers has been collapsed in the U.S., there was a huge aggregate demand shock, which spread around the world. So that also like affected Japanese job market. So at the time, I was at the point I was thinking whether I should proceed learning more about physics or getting some job and having making a building up some career first at the private sector, and then maybe I could like come back to continue to study in the Ph.D. program. So at that time, the global environment was very bad, so I have like decided to take a job, and I have like applied probably more than like 300, 400 firms in Japan. So I basically applied everything. When I see job posting, I just like applied it. And somehow, Bank of Japan has getting like interest in hiring me. So that was like pure like chance. Like I didn't like actually choose it. They chose me to become an economist there. And after joining the BOJ, I was also like fortunate to have studying abroad program. So Bank of Japan has been like financing me to study in the U.S. So I studied 2 years in economics, and then I felt the deepness of the knowledge and how, yes, economics is a very interesting field because we could tackle a lot of social problems, and I was very fascinated about that. So then I quit the BOJ and I continue studying it. But I was also like into finance, so I switched from econ to finance, which was not a huge difference because basically we are using the same tool, and finance is a field of applied economics. So that's the reason why I started my academic career from physics to economics and ended up to PhD in finance.
I can see rather the journey, and it's very surprising because somebody who has the craft of the physics and now has the expertise of finance, that's very unique. I only saw that in very few positions, like quantitative researcher that has a PhD in physics, but just to apply in finance, and still it's very, very specific. And your journey tells us that it's about the opportunities that you get along. So that's a very, very nice way that you're sharing. Now, Wisconsin, you mentioned about that place. What made you say that's the place to go?
Okay, so that's also pure chance. Okay, to be honest, so BOJ was telling me to apply top master PhD program in the U.S. So I just like apply all the programs I could like apply, and I only get one offer, and that offer was from Wisconsin. So again, it was pure chance.
And when you arrived there in that place that is closer to the border than Canada and closer to the border of Mexico, so how was your impression of Wisconsin?
Wow, like it was very cold in the winter, but it's a beautiful place. In Wisconsin, in Madison, there's a big lake, and yeah, people enjoy the lake, of course, in the summer, but also in the winter. They could do skating on the lake, and yeah, it's a very nice place. And my wife also like enjoy, my kids also enjoy, and myself also enjoy that place. Yeah. Have you ever been to Wisconsin before, or somewhere in the Midwest?
Yeah,
Have you ever been?
very nice areas, especially in the winter, because one thing is on the southern side usually is hot, and the low temperature is not as lower as what you see in the north. Number one. Number two, the infrastructure itself allows you to enjoy the winter a little more, because this is something that is not very appreciated in the south. all of a sudden the temperature goes to, let's say, 3 degrees Celsius or 0 degrees Celsius, and we receive the messages, oh, you need to cover the pipes because it's going to be like there's such a huge problem, and in the north nothing like that happens. And also, something to say about Wisconsin. Maybe you realized that during your time that a lot of people follow the Green Bay Packers because they are from.
Yeah.
Why it's happening? Because during Sunday, football usually goes from the game starts at noon or at 3 p.m. or at 7 p.m. But the Green Bay Packers always have a slot around 3 p.m. that is shown across the nation. Like you can see them playing regardless of the channel for some reason. And other teams they're fighting for the same time zone, and it's very hard to follow your team. Then you have to pay the NFL ticket, the cable, or the streaming. So that's why the Green Bay Packers are so popular.
I see.
Because they have the coincidence to have that. Lambeau Field right there in Green Bay, in Green Bay is very cool, very nice. But also Green Bay is kind of a smaller city compared to the other ones. And yeah, when Christmas times arrives, when the winter arrives, the snow arrives, it's like, yeah, you feel the holiday season there. So, and also I have to confess, during my time in Cambridge, Massachusetts, I love to run almost every day because of the cold weather. Because in the areas like are more humid, the humidity itself takes all of your energy when you're running.
Yeah.
And in the cold weather, it's like, hey, nothing happened. The legs are fresh. It's very cool. So yeah, those are very nice memories of that place.
As a side note, now our Master in Central Banking students are in Massachusetts, Boston, and there are a couple of like students who are based here in Southeast Asia for entire of their life, never have seen snows, so they are pretty enjoying the winter or spring.
Oh yeah, right now it's
temperature
spring.
and weather.
And one little
experience.
quick tip is the layering. When you are in the cold environment, it's the layering. So I know that in Japan you also have some snow.
Yeah, a few times, maybe 2 or 3 times you see. I grew up in Tokyo. I was living in Tokyo, but yeah, only like 2 or 3 times.
And how is the cold weather there compared to the other place?
Well, the temperature itself is not that low, like especially compared to the Midwest in the U.S. But you feel colder maybe than the U.S. because Japan, Tokyo, people use public transportation, right? So you have a lot of stations. You need to walk for 10 to 15 minutes, and there's a lot of tall buildings, right? So if you have tall buildings, the wind just like go through the in between the tall buildings, and yeah, you got like shiver, right? And yeah, so yeah, you need to like walk 10 to 15 minutes. You get like cold and take a subway, and then you need to take another like 10 or 15 minutes walk to get to your destination.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so that's the part of the city life.
Wow. Yeah, it's very revealing that across all these buildings and you can have the impact of the frozen wind because of the commuting itself. Yeah. I only remember that maybe in taking my commuting in Manhattan, but not in lower Manhattan, which is but kind of the upper Manhattan, because right there the train stations were also a little separated, and you need to go and walk around. Yeah, I can feel that. Now, your time here in Malaysia, when you arrived here, how was your impression?
So I came here in 2000 was 21. So it was in the middle of COVID. So at that time I haven't had a chance to like go around the city. So I was basically stuck inside my condo. But after then, the relief of the COVID, and I started to travel and take a look. City, I was very amazed about people, culture, foods. Uh, there's a lot of food options here, right? And also, last time I came to Cal, it was also about 10 years ago, and city has been like changed a lot, really. There are more and more like tall buildings. I haven't like seen this much of number of shopping malls here. So yeah, cities are growing, but still the peoples are very nice. So I really love Cal and Malaysia.
Oh yeah, they truly are nice, and it's like the infrastructure allows you also to commute around. There is a problem with traffic as well, but it's not as bad as other places like Jakarta or Bangkok. And of course, you will not experience snow here because it's like closer to the equator, but still, uh, the nights can be still a little humid, but it's still fresh enough, so you can walk around, take the train, no problem. And the food options they are wide and open. They are wide and open, and I would say that it's a good experience. It gets a little complicated when you want to get a particular kind of food, let's say Turkish food or the other ones that are a little more outside the region. Yeah, that can be a little difficult, but hey, you can do something. It's like when there is a will, there is a way. So that's the thing.
I see.
Now, given the perspective that you have been having this opportunity to get your PhD in Wisconsin, uh, I want to get your train of thought to understand after getting the PhD or during the time you were culminating this, what makes you say now the next stop is Malaysia?
Okay, so So, again, that was also a pure chance. I think what I was thinking is, so actually working in Malaysia, working in Southeast Asia, was a part of my dream because I was living so long in Asia. So the Asian culture is part of myself, and I was also always thinking about how to like contribute and bringing back things I learned back to my like region. So, but I never thought I was coming back this early. Yeah, so it was pure chance, but the key reason is probably not only the place is Malaysia. Uh, the key reason was this ASB, Asia School Business, is a very special place in terms of this school is established in collaboration in between MIT Sloan and the Central Bank of Malaysia. Okay? So since I get a PhD in business from the business school, so I was like heavily involved in that part as well. But at the same time, I am a former economist from the central bank. So I also have a lot of my decision making is my thinking about economy. I was like very influenced by the central banking. So this combination, a rare combination, was a fascinating opportunity, and I could not like really say no, right? It's a very interesting place to build up my career. So yeah, that's the reason why I'm here.
That's very refreshing to hear because it's like you have the best of the both worlds, and when you have this opportunity on your hand, it's like, why not? That's true. And of course, there is more than the academic life, and there is a life after work. Uh, can you share a little what a person like you will do? Like, okay, it's time to explore, or where should I go? Things like that.
Yeah, so my personal life is I'm a father of 3 kids, so yeah, I spend a lot of time with my kids. I help not teaching, but help my son learning violin. So I'm not like teaching him, but I'm coaching him. And I also do a lot of drawing with my daughters, and yeah, basically a lot of time I use for my kids. Besides that, I love exploring new foods. Right? So yesterday I went to a new Chinese restaurant. I also try a lot of different type of fruits. So yeah, there are a lot of fruits that you have never like tried, right?
Ah.
Yeah, yeah. So I love like exploring new foods. Sometimes I do a little bit of cooking by myself. Do you cook by yourself?
Yeah, from time to time.
Okay, okay. What kind of like genre, like what kind of foods do you prepare?
Usually it's gonna be more into the Tex-Mex, more into the Midwest, like some normal breakfast tacos or some carne asada. That would be something.
I see.
Or if I feel a little more into the flair, it will be like a salmon, just grilling it and trying to put it with some side potatoes, just to feel okay. That's cool. There are other times that I prefer to, of course, have my staple of the breakfast, which is a typical pancake with some syrup and some bananas, just to keep things okay. And that would be something. Of course, you are always tempted that around you can get very good selections for like 8 ringgits or 10 ringgits, which is good.
Yeah. Foods are cheaper. Cheap. Sometimes more expensive if you try to like prepare by yourself.
Yeah, and that's where the little predicament comes because why you want to put so much money to cook when you can get something around? If you cannot get the food that you want, but you can make it, you better make it.
Yeah.
And that will be a very nice compromise because, like, yeah, where can I get that kind of food around? I need to travel. How many kilometers? We don't know. But you can do it. Well, that's on you. Talking about compromises, learning from your journey, I would like to hear from you. Which was the most difficult compromise that you faced and how you came over it?
I actually have never felt any compromise in my life. Of course, as I said, like my whole life is by chance or random shocks, right? So sometimes I feel I don't have any control on it, but never knows. Like I think that's a good thing, right? Because if you feel something new, that it means that you are somewhat like capable to do those like new kind of jobs, right? So that's a new thing, and each time you get those like random shocks, yeah, even if you feel you don't have any control on that, I mean that makes you different from others. So I have never like felt I compromise or yeah something like that.
Well, that's very cool to hear because sometimes you are always, this is the rhetorical you. Sometimes you are always walking through the life and it's like, what should I have done different? Or it was the right decision at the right time. It's like, don't let that consume you. Just keep moving forward. Just keep moving forward and life will come out. Talking about life and talking about places, you mentioned about the food as a very indicative place that you are in Malaysia. Also, what are the little differences that you have seen across the region? Because you mentioned that you were also in Thailand and just been also in other places.
In terms of food culture,
It can be food, culture, or something that you want to incorporate.
the difference in Southeast Asia. Yeah, so actually I started traveling. So I was in Vietnam a week before, and a couple of weeks ago I was in Maldives. So I'm now like catching up. So I don't have maybe a really. I could now like, give you a deep conversation on that maybe. Let's see the difference. Yeah. Of course, differences are huge in a good way. Um, wow. Let's see. Maybe I could just ask first, like, what is your opinion on that? And while you're talking, I could like think a little
Yeah.
more.
One of the differences I realized is that there are places that you can drive on the left and the other one that you drive on the right. For example, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, you drive on the left, but in Taiwan you drive on the right. That's one thing. Second thing I realized is that there are places that are more cash economy than, let's say, QR or debit credit. One thing is in Indonesia, this is mostly cash. But if you go to places in China like Shenzhen or Guangdong or Beijing or Shanghai, everything is digital. And I have not been there directly. Some friends have been there, and they even told me that they can pay with their watch with Alipay, and it's like for them to feel the notes can be a little rough. And I'm like, I'm surprised we're living in the same year, but they are having a different experience. And the other thing I realized is that English as a way to talk is very underappreciated because we assume that by granted when we are in places like in Singapore, Malaysia, or other places like some parts of Hong Kong. Because if you go to other places, all of a sudden English is not very well practiced, and you are at the mercy of whatever happens there. Or if you have a good Google Translator, okay, that can help. That also leads me to the reasoning of how people are using the data when you have the phone. This is very unique. In some places, to get your SIM card, you just buy a SIM card and that's it. And in other places, you need to show your passport. They have to fill a form, and you cannot pay with debit or credit. You have to pay with cash only. So that can be something as well. Like the barrier to entry, only to get your SIM card, can be a little more difficult at moments. Just to get the data for your phone. So those are the things that I realized that can be a little different. And of course, people eat with the silvers. Let's say you have the fork and the knife, and in other places it's only the fork and the spoon, and where is the knife? So those are the things.
Yeah, that also like surprised me. Yeah, using the spoon as like both the spoon and knife, right?
Oh yeah.
When you try to like cut things.
Of course.
You can use spoons.
I also got my fair share of practicing with the chopsticks when I go to the store centers. Because it's like you have the experience there. It's like, okay, now I can feel this a little more. And there have been other places I have to eat with my hands, like the banana leaves of the Indian restaurants.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's part of the experience. Okay, and they have the infrastructure of the restaurant allows you to also wash your hands properly before and after. So it's like they already know what to do.
I see.
So those are also the little things.
Yeah, I haven't had tried to like eat things by my like bare hands yet, but maybe for another 1 or 2 years, I'm gonna start doing that. Is it easy or?
I realized that you need to position the fingers in a certain way, and when they give you the banana leaf, they are like the selections that you put allow yourself to have the experience. Sometimes they give you like small little cups that have like the certain sauces that can be a little more delicate to handle. And of course, most of the Indian cuisine is a little away from meat, except for chicken or other delicacies. So you can start combining or trying to see what is the rice is about, because in the end, when you're done, you usually deliver the banana leaf and they just return it to the earth or they just dispose it properly. This is something that I learned. So I know there's very nice places in Bansar that you can also go there and see, okay, how much is the banana leaf? And I see families going there like on Friday night just for that. That was something that I realized.
So about the difference of the cultures, this region, I could not like have a short answer to that, but I'm very interested in why people behave or why this like culture looks like this compared to the others. Why this country ends up to this like current situation. There's a long history behind there, and yeah, it takes time to like understand in depth about that, and it's always like very interesting to take a look on it. So yeah, I'm very fascinated. And also like one interesting thing. So you have like mentioned about the information technology like advanced in this region, Southeast Asia, and sometimes like see something that I haven't like never imagined, but there is a great advance in IT technology. So one example, this is not like, especially coming from Southeast Asia, but I've been like visiting a country which are a collection of islands, and the population was less than like 1 million people. Okay, so in that kind of like environment, what do you like imagine about the level of the IT technology in the country? So in that like country, there's so many like islands, right? So if you go to financial institutions, what they're gonna say is it's nearly impossible to print out a letter and send those like paper-based letter to the customer, because the customers are living in different like hundreds of different like islands. So they are kind of like constrained on using IT technology to do their business. So investing in a lot of IT, computers, and people are necessary for them to survive, right? So that like pushes their IT level further, way above the average. Okay? So that's kind of like an interesting situation, right? I haven't like seen in Japan before, and that's a very unique thing which is happening in some of the country around this place. So yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I remember there was even efforts to increase the financial literacy and the financial inclusion in places like, let's say, Papua New Guinea or the other around the Pacific. That is like, okay, you are pushing to the limit and then you're going beyond, and the final outcome is more people getting in the inclusion of the market and in the inclusion of the economy, and at the same time you are leveling up your technologies. So that's like a win-win. Of course it takes a little time, but good things time. And given about time, I would like to discuss with you. I remember last week we got the opportunity to share this course of monetary policy. And for me, who is mostly an engineer that right now is into business, it can be a little far away the topic. But for you, who has been mostly on the other side, can you tell us what was the applications of monetary policy for the people who are not familiar with it?
Okay, yeah. So monetary policy is one of the important tools that central bank use for stabilizing the economy. And what is the monetary policy? So monetary policy is basically central bank has a power to control interest rates. So what kind of like interest rates we are talking? So the central banks are controlling interest rates in a very special market that mostly the big financial institutions are lending or buying security in that market. So central banks are controlling interest rates, very particular interest rates. But the point here is when the central bank intervene on those interest rates, that intervention will spread across every like interest rates you can imagine. So for example, mortgage rates. Mortgage rates is interest rates when you get the loans from the bank. That's the interest rates you're going to pay. Deposit rates are another like important interest rate. So instead of like paying fees to the bank, deposit rates, if you give deposit to the bank, you are getting some income, right? The fees which the banks are paying to the household. So mortgage rates, deposit rates, also other kind of every kind of like interest rates. If you're running small business, you might be borrowing some money from the banks. That loan rates are also going to affect it. So monetary policy, central banks are changing the interest rates, and in the economy, all the interest rates are going to move in the same direction. Okay, it might be going up, it might be going down. It depends on the situation. Mm-hmm. So, as a public, as a normal person, what is important is every kind of your decision making in life stage, like buying houses or paying some college fees to your kids, a big like financial decisions, you might want to like concern what the central banks are going to do in 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years moving forward, because that is going to affect your costs on financing, and eventually it might also like affect your decision making. So for example, if the central banks are likely to raise the interest rates in 2 years or 3 years, in that case you might want to think, stop and start thinking about whether you should buy your own house or not, because your mortgage rates could be affected by the central bank's decision making. And let me just throw it back to you, but now the next question is how the central banks are deciding whether to raise the interest rates or not, or lowering, how they're making their monetary policy like decision making. That's probably the next step you might want to like think about. Okay?
Yeah, because usually you have a lot of people in the financial channels trying to forecast what is going to be the decision to go up or to go down, or even to be going to compromise to say there's not going to be any alteration in the interest rates for at least 3 quarters, and it's like I'm not sure if they are trying to predict or they are speculating at times. Mm-hmm. Because it's still fresh in my memory what happened a year ago with the SVB bank right there in California, which was a very famous bank to give loans to the startups. Mm-hmm. But because they were doing the loans in a different interest rate that was totally foreign to what was going on in the recent months, then all of a sudden a lot of the startups were going underwater, they were not meeting payroll, and then a lot of people do the bank runs to get the cash out. It was a problem. And then another bank also fell, which is the First Reserve or something. We saw a conglomeration of M&As, like a consolidation of the small banks, the regional banks, which is affecting particularly people in the Midwest. Because in the big cities you will always have the big bank, but in the Midwest you will have these regional banks that are giving a lot of money to the businesses and also employment to the people that are living around. So yes, that kind of forecast, that change affects so much that at the beginning you say, okay, that's a central bank thing. Mm-hmm. That affects everything. And that was maybe the most important lesson that we got from that time. Now, I realized that during that particular time that we got the chance to share that discussion, I saw also the importance of coding. And this is something that many people give it by granted that, okay, you're studying economics or you're studying finance. It's like you're not a software engineer, you're not a developer engineer. So how important is to have coding as a part of your craft?
I see. So for my research, coding is essential. coding is almost like everything. Actually, the whole paper itself is a package of code because uh, all the documents, textings are written in a language called LaTeX, and also all the graphs and um, manipulation of the numbers are written in codes in order to keep the track record, right? So collecting the data, maybe in some case your data is from website, right? But you want to like keep the record that how do you like collect those data, right? To make sure you don't forget and also increase your transparency of your approach, right? So coding is more like record keeping in some sense. So that's one like important function to for academic research to keep what every steps. What are you doing? You could like write down in your code, and then make it public, and then everyone could like see what you're doing. That's very important. But in a very more like big picture, yes, coding is becoming very different from the past, and now we are in a transition like period, a huge like transition period because of the emerging AI. So I just want to like talk a little bit about that, and also give you some my background. So I have been like coding for almost like 20 years. So I started coding when I was probably 16 or 17. Now am 39, so I have like coding more than like 20 years, 22 years, 3 years. In a very old age, there was like a magazine in a bookstore, and I bought some magazine, and there's a code on the magazine. So I type in my computer, and that's the only way, not the only way, but probably the best way to learn coding at that period, like 20 years ago, okay? Now, things are very different because you don't need to go to the bookstore to buy the magazine. Maybe bookstores now like closing, so even though it's very hard to find a bookstore, but now we could like search on the internet. Even we could like ask ChatGPT or other like generative like AI for help, and that is a huge change. So it's definitely lowering the bar, and everyone can now like code very easily. So now I think the next question is whether you should code for something, right? So I think people will be becoming more and more productive in general if you could code. And because, yeah, because what human wants to do is they want to think about the key idea, but let the computer do the simple, easy task, right? And computers are very good at that. So if you could code, then you have more option and better way to allocate your time for spending more time on productive, like creative job, and let the computer do the simple task. Okay, but if you could not like code, you don't have any choice of that, right? You could like ask other person to do it, but still it's good that you have like full control of doing that. So my short answer to your question is yes, the coding is very important, especially for the research, and I think even like everyone should start like learning coding because the entry costs and also the cost of like coding are getting lower and lower, given the help from the AI. And I'm using actually a lot of AIs now.
Oh, so what are you using now? Are you using Mistral, GPT? Are you using, which one is the
Yeah,
favorite
so
choice?
yeah, I use ChatGPT, and I also like use heavily something called Copilot. So Copilot it's kind of like an embedded interactive chat feature in a text editor like software. So when you code, you kind of like use a special type of text editor, and you write down all the lines of code. But now with the help of Copilot, for example, if you write a plain like language, okay, I want to print hello on the screen. If you write that in English, and then this like Copilot will predict what kind of code you want to write in the next line. So they're gonna do all those like jobs, right? Based on the huge documentation of the particular like program code, which are somewhere in the internet. They're gonna refer to those like documentation and pull all the information you need and write down one line of code on below of your comments written in plain English, right? So now like you don't need to like know what is the print function it is. Yeah, you just need to tell the Copilot what is the procedure you want to do. So that's a huge change, right?
Absolutely. It's a huge change because now you are multiplying the productivity to generate outcomes that were not imaginable way before.
Yeah, right. And you don't even like you have a lot of extra mental space, right? So now you don't need to like learn about all the details, right? You just need to like only focusing on the structure, logics, and outcomes, right? So that's a huge change, I think.
And it's very nice that we are discussing this after almost a year or so of the homecoming of artificial intelligence, because like a year and a half ago nobody cared about this because it was not on the map, and now it's like look at that, it can be used hand to hand to make everybody more productive.
Yeah, that's definitely.
Given that you are doing research, I would like to ask if it were possible to discuss what are you cooking right now?
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'm always happy to talk about my research. So, my current like topic, which I'm like working now, is to understand regulations on bank CEO compensation. Why I am asking that question? Because there are suspicion, and some people have strong idea that the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009, there are a lot of banks, commercial banks, has been failed, and those failures are connected to CEOs' incentives. Right? So CEOs' compensation is a little bit more complicated than a standard like employee. So standard employee, most compensation is in form of cash, which is a cash salary, right? Fixed cash salary. And you could have a small portion of cash bonuses, but I think that's the standard package for most of the standard employees. In some case, you could get some stock options, right? And also you could get granted stock, right? And then now these like extra layers are getting more and more compensation structure, more and more complicated. But my point is the bank CEO compensation structures are even more complicated, and they have a complicated structure of the incentive mechanism. So let me talk a little bit more about the incentives here. So let's just like compare the simple comparison, do a simple comparison between fixed salary versus the bonus, right? So what if the bonus is strongly connected to short-term performance? And what if there are two CEOs that have a different compensation design? One CEOs have zero like bonus. Even the firms are performing or the banks are performing very, very good, the bonus are fixed to zero. In that case, that CEO might have zero incentive to inflate their short-term performance of the bank because no like monetary incentive to that like firm or the bank. In other case, the other like CEO, if they have the compensation structure design was toward to short-term cash compensation, bonus, and then that CEO might have a tendency to take more like short-term risk to inflate the short-term performance by risking the long-term like stability of the bank. So that's one like example of how the fixed salary versus the short-term cash compensation, the compensation design could change the CEO's decision making. So I'm going to in the paper I'm like going more deeper into the data of 500, 600 bank CEOs compensation structure, which I'm taking a look on, and try to understand how each like bank CEOs like incentives are in the balance in between short term versus long term, and how that like connected to the actual outcome, actual failure, actual bankruptcy we see in the 2008-2009 global financial crisis.
And I can see the application of this towards the resilience of a bank or the resilience of an enterprise in hard times. Because then we can test, are the incentives really connected? I can disclose something that I saw in the oil and gas industry with many oil and gas CEOs back in 2015 or 2017, that instead of compromising for an M&A, or instead of, okay, let's realign the incentive to keep their company running, they decided to file for Chapter 11, get a golden parachute, and liquidate the company. And it was because by the time they were executing that, they were getting not only stock options or liquidating the stock options at a premium instead of everybody else, but also they got cash bonuses or board seats in other companies. So that was a little clarifying back in those ages when the oil and gas industry was still trying to overcome the very hard days of 2017 or 2018. Because nowadays the price is a little up, but most of the money is not into the engineering, but it's in the training. So that was something, number one, and also something that I can disclose about number two is, and you can see on the news, many CEOs sometimes are motivated to create incentives to their middle management to capture contracts. And sometimes the contracts cannot be done legally because they are regional laws that don't allow us to do that. These are the cases that happens with Trafigura, Gumbor, and Vitol, that then they realize that we can bribe the officials just to make the metrics go on. And of course, it stains the company. But in the end, it's not about, okay, the culture is changing, but they are getting more and more sophisticated just to get around. So that will be something that can also be elemental. Like these CEOs, the ones that only want to get more profit for their own, they will get more and more sophisticated to find artifacts to keep the things moving, whereas everybody tries to get a better culture. I can see that also happening.
Yeah. So I think you're raising the corporate governance issues in non-financial sector, right? So there are a lot of research done in that field for non-financial firms, but it's more like questionable or interesting questions is still out there if we could think the same thing, same issues in corporate governance, which applies or not applied in the banking sector. Yeah. So my contribution in my research is to do a very careful data collection for the compensation structure in the banking sector, and try to contrast the difference in between non-financial firm versus financial firm. Because non-financial firms and financial firms are very different in many ways. Like one example is how many like regulations that those like companies are facing. Non-financial financial companies are less regulated compared to the financial institutions. That's only one example, but yeah.
And I can see an immediate impact of this, let's say, in the near future, because this is something that happens in Singapore. For some reason, they have a particular salary cap or salary table for people who are in the non-financial sector, and another one for the financial sector. And I believe that your insights will also bring more value towards that particular field.
Yeah, I hope so.
Given that a lot of people have been watching this, there will be some young Ikuos also watching this. And I would like to close the interview with a question. What piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
Okay, so be optimistic. I think that's the single advice I could like give to myself. Are you an optimistic person?
Yeah, yeah, a little too optimistic. And then it's like, I need some reality check.
I see, I see. But what if you are hit by those like random shocks, these idiosyncratic shocks? Sometimes it could be good, sometimes it could be bad. Are you still like keeping yourself positive?
You have to remain positive because it's like it's through the challenges that you develop this character
I see.
and only gets you more and more resilient. And of course, when you have this kind of pressure, always ask on your network, always ask to your friends to also help you with that reality check because too much optimism can be like an echo chamber, and you always want to be in a place that you are aware of where you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I think this is particularly for me. I'm a pessimistic person, so I need to take a balancing towards to neutral. But yeah, try to like seeking too much of the reason why this shock happens. It might just like waste of time by doing that. So not to like spend too much time on like looking back. Try to like focusing on what you're doing right now. I think that's the important part of my life lesson.
Professor Rico, I really appreciate this.
Yeah, thank you so much.
How can people find you?
I'm almost like 5 days weekdays in my office. Also, you could like send me an email or WhatsApp. Yeah, I'm pretty open.
Thank you very much,
Yeah,
Professor
thank
Rico,
you
for
so
this
much.
time. And for people out there, please stay safe and see you when I see you. Bye.